What's up, hooligans? Jay Hooligan here,
Hooligan V.
and welcome to our live lunch. And this is Tuesday, noon. Every Tuesday and Thursday at noon, we're going to be doing a live lunch. So it's been an interesting few weeks. First of all, shout out to the Wandering Kiltsman for this Beer Me, I'm Irish shirt. It's pretty cool. I'm really enjoying it. It finally came in. It's a new design. It's on sale, 15% off at thewanderingkiltsman.com/shop. So you can get yours today. Beer Me, I'm Irish. I do actually have a little bit of Irish in me. I like to say it's my liver because I can drink pretty well. But yes, I'm really enjoying the shirt. It's pretty cool. So
I like it. It looks nice.
Yeah. All right. So today's topic is life, death, and energy. However, since we are we're film centric, we did want to go over some film stuff. Just a couple things first before we get into that on here. So I know we mentioned this in the last one, how theaters are going to be opening up. I believe they're at 45% capacity, or not 45% capacity, but like 45% of theaters have reopened. I know that those numbers probably have changed since everybody started opening up.
California theaters are open.
Yep, California theaters are open. So this from here, right from Hollywood Reporter: box office enjoys biggest weekend since pandemic shut down theaters. So let me go. Box office revenue for the March 5th through 7th weekend is an estimated $25 million, with cinemas in New York City now allowed to reopen at 25% capacity, which I believe they clarify in here as being about 50 people. Yep, it's right here. 25% capacity, or about 50 people. So at least other places, and I know I said it, California and New York is probably going to have this standoff on who can stay locked down the longest. The Bay Area in particular was the first to lock down in the country before they started making the entire country lock down.
Is it?
Yes.
Oh, it's been so long.
And that was the initial, was supposed to be the first 14 days to 15 days, whatever, to flatten the curve, and somehow everybody forgot about flattening the curve, and they just kept extending it. And we were the longest to be in that first lockdown anyway, considering that before any sort of reopening whatsoever, which was dumb in many regards. At least they were on here. And like we mentioned last week too, Raya and the Last Dragon, that Cinemark was not playing that, so again they kind of had a disappointing weekend. However, I believe they still made. They were still one of the top two, along with Tom and Jerry. So with Cinemark reopening, and I know the theaters were reopening in not just San Francisco but in New York City. I know New York City was playing that. Cinemark was not playing any of the Raya and the Last Dragon movies, the animation on there, and Disney decided to throw that onto do a same day release along, I believe it mentions it in here too, along with Universal and Warner Brothers, where they're actually doing a same day release where it's releasing in theaters and on their own platforms, streaming platforms at the same time. So it did get hit, so they're wondering, like, well, people are just going to have to wait because there was an additional cost. If you have Disney Plus, you will not be able to see Raya and the Last Dragon unless you pay an additional $30 all the way up until, I believe, June 4th is the date on here. It does mention it in here. I don't know if I want to go reading into it.
Or you can wait it out to get the same experience.
Well, that's what I'm saying, waiting it out on here until, I think it was like June 4th. Yep, June 4th date. So June 4th on the same platform. It will release, so you can actually see it for free if you do have the Disney Plus membership. So again, this is kind of that idea of what we talked about before, how they're tacking on just cost after cost, trying to cut out third party, which is literally vertically integrating while they distribute. Even if they have a same day release, it's like, well, you can watch it in your home, just pay us the $30. So you're not getting that theatrical experience. They want you to spend all your money purely on Disney. They don't want third party. They don't want theaters out there.
But when you go to the theater, you pay less than that.
Yeah.
And get that better experience, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is dumb.
Well, I guess they're trying to say like, well, if you have more people at home, you're gonna be paying more than $30 anyway. So if you got a
But if
family
you don't,
of 7, yeah, if
how
you
are they
don't,
gonna prove that?
yeah, exactly. But and that's the thing, or you can have your friends over, etc., etc. But those are always the arguments for these platforms like that, especially for Disney trying to say like, well, people are so impatient. We're no longer, our audience members are so impatient that we have to negate all theaters and just go to our streaming platform because the consumer's just impatient. They want it now, and we're just bending to their will, which is complete bull. It's not real. They're just using us as an excuse. So that's what it's got on here. That's essentially what's going on in the film industry. I honestly don't know what else has been going on. Because it kind of took a couple weeks to deal with it. Like I said, there was a couple personal issues that were going on. I actually attended my first funeral I have in a long time. It's not my first funeral ever. It's just it was actually yesterday. Today's Tuesday. Yeah. Yesterday. So for the first time in a long time, I got to attend my first funeral for my aunt who passed away a couple weeks ago. And I think out of total, just this year alone in my family's pretty big. I think we had about four different deaths already. So even after my aunt, my uncle also passed away. So, but again, this was the first time that I had attended a funeral in a long time. It's been many years that I've actually been to one, excluding all the lockdowns and whatnot from last year and everything like that. But as such, I wanted to talk a little bit about just life, life, death, universe and everything. 42. You don't. Oh, you don't get that reference. It's okay.
What does that mean?
The answer to life, the universe, and everything is 42. What is that supposed to mean? I don't know. You just asked me to find that answer. I just gave you the answer. I don't know what the question is. That was deep thought. Okay, so if you don't know what that is, that's referencing Douglas Adams' The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Universe.
Oh.
I always get that mixed up. To the Galaxy.
Book.
Yeah.
Sorry to know which book.
Oh, I love that book. I read that book when I was in middle school. It's one of my favorite books. It is satire. It is political satire. If you haven't read the book and you've only watched the movie, I highly suggest you read the book because it is filled so much more with satire than what the movie does. Because the movie was, I felt, although they did a good job with it, it more tried to stay with just the comedy aspect. And I'm like, okay, I get it. It's a different medium. But there's so much more in the book, as a lot of people say. But in the context of just the types of description, they try to add some of that into the narrator. So when you hear the narrator in the movie kind of dogging on people, and adding the political satire for it, it is so much more. So imagine that throughout the entire book, through most of it. The descriptions are fantastic.
I read like maybe half of the book, and I never got that comedy. Like I got a little here and there, but it was never like full. I haven't seen the movie either.
Are you kidding?
I only read half the book. It was interesting.
You gotta finish it. It is satire. It's one of my favorite books out there. I want to reread it again. I think I have. There was like it's a really thick book, but it has like all the series in it, so I could just read all of them. I forget what is it? The Restaurant at the End of the Universe, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, Restaurant at the End of the Universe, and I forget if there were other ones a part of that series, but for sure that was one of the ones that really opened me up to satire was Hitchhiker's Guide, and that again I read that in middle school, and still one of my favorite books out there. But yeah, just the descriptions of the Vogons and everything. It's anyways, so that's where they these super intelligent beings created this massive computer to give us the answer to life, the universe, and everything. And it took like it was like 100 or 1,000 years or something, and they're like, oh, what's the answer? It's 42. What? Like that then what's the question? And then this giant computer's like, I don't know. You only asked me to calculate the answer, so I gave the answer. It's 42. And so now they had to construct another computer to find out what the question to life, the universe, and everything was. So again, just fantastic satire. If you haven't read Hitchhiker's Guide, I highly recommend it. It's yeah. Anyway, so talking, kind of going back to just that again. That's 42. If you ever hear anybody say that, that's literally referencing Douglas Adams.
42 years old?
No, nope, nope. Didn't say 42 years. Just said 42. That's the answer. That's it. Anyway, so like I said, it was the first time I've actually attended a funeral. Was just yesterday, and it was really nice services. They did try to stream. Unfortunately, I know because people that were tuning into the stream, there are parts of it that they couldn't hear because they were streaming on a laptop, and obviously when they were at the podium speaking, that was going through their speakers, which wasn't turned up all the way, so there was no direct line from their speakers to the laptop, so the stream was hard to hear. So me coming from the family that I come from, we've always been, and you can say it's the Asian part of me or not, we've always videotaped a lot of our family events, including funerals and celebrations, everything. We filmed everything. That's the background that I come from, and so we did videotape it, and we're gonna share that with the family so people can actually hear it. So I know a lot of people did tune into it, so that was one thing that we got to at least share across from people that there was some other my other family that couldn't make it because they just not just travel restrictions, but just like they just can't, whether it be financially, whether it be physically. They couldn't join in. So doing the stream thing, it was a great service for the cemetery to offer. However, they need it's still kind of a work in progress. I believe there are new people in there as well. But kind of talking about that, it was actually a great celebration. My cousin danced, my other cousin sang. It was really great. It kind of brought back that family aspect of just everybody's kind of missing, and we were able to connect, and we had a great get together afterwards. We had I guess lunch. Yeah, because it was afternoon. Yeah, I kind of had like a late lunch, and everybody was there to kind of talk stories and just kind of hang out and just reconnect, and it ended up being just really great. That everybody can kind of get together, and but yeah, that's where I'm coming from with a lot of this, where it's we start talking about life, we start talking about death, and then I'm talking to one of my cousins and finding out like, oh, she's very much into energy, so energy work and everything. That's my background. I was studying that for a very long time back in the early 2000s on energy and the esoteric arts and things like that. So it's something I kind of wanted to touch base upon, because whenever I talk about not just the biology and the chemistry of the body, I also talk about your meditation and how there are physiological changes to it, but there are also mental and maturity things that do occur when you do these certain things. And I know that's how we started the channel. The channel started out with understanding yourself, that spiritual journey, that spiritual development, which again, just for clarification, I don't necessarily mean, when I say spiritual, I don't necessarily mean that it is religious, although that religion does deal with spiritual, with spiritual development. What I call spiritual development is essentially internal reflection, because you look at almost all I don't say all of them, but many of the religions out there, when they talk about repenting or prayer or things like that, a lot of that is internal reflection. It is an internal reflection of self to build yourself in that maturity, so you just become the best version of yourself. Okay, but that only happens when you can honestly reflect, because there's certain things that inherently, like, oh, that was wrong, or maybe I shouldn't have done that, or you question those certain things that come out. And a lot of times those questions don't get answered except through spiritual development, through meditation, through prayer, or however you want to call it. But essentially, those things are the same thing. You know, I call prayer and internal reflection, meditation, all those things kind of run along the same lines because they have the same basics. Right. So sorry, I know I'm talking a lot. I don't know if you have anything. Just hop in here when you're
I did, and then I lost it.
Yeah, that's why you just got to jump in for that stuff. So, yeah, it was great because I took my kid, and I know it's not his first funeral that he'd been to, but I went to talk to him afterwards and just asked him how he felt, and he's like, oh, he was doing okay. He didn't know my aunt that well because again, she was distance, and everything, but he knew who she was at least. And he said something to me after I asked him, when I talked to him about how, everybody passes, everybody dies. And he said something, he was like, yeah, I just kind of see it as, he actually said, I wanted to change, I had a different take on it. And he said, I just kind of feel like it was a transition, like it's moving on to something else. Which is wildly intuitive for a kid.
That's interesting. I just learned that by reading stuff up on death. It's not about death itself. It's about transforming.
Yeah. And I've talked about this a lot, not necessarily on here, but I've talked about this on a lot of the communities from way back in the day that I used to write for, and talking about transformation of energy. And now, matter itself, the physical, everything that's physical, when you come down to its basic levels, we are made of energy. There is no, there's no difference of it. You can break up, matter and molecules as far down as you want, but we are still energy at our basic level. So the differentiation, again, is just different manifestations of energy, and if you understand, like, the energy itself cannot be created, cannot be destroyed. It just transforms into different formats.
I'm talking about the biofield that's around us.
Yeah, that's part of it too. Because, alright, so you get into a lot of different other things. You talk about biofields. Biofields, essentially, what's the best way to put that? Think of it almost like a. I don't want to say it's almost like Earth with its gravitational field, but it kind of is. You have a particular energy field around it. There is an electromagnetic field around the Earth, just based purely on its mass, right? And that I'm talking a little bit more on
the energy.
It is still energy, yeah, but that's just energy that you put out. And honestly, this kind of goes back to, and I forget where I was listening to. They were talking about something about, oh yeah. If I think I was listening to a podcast or something, and they were talking about energy and life and how, maybe later on in life, if we didn't have finite restrictions on how much land we could use, like that was the whole reason why there's this competition between animals and where even people, where we become violent because we don't have the space. And I thought, well, no. Unfortunately, that's only one factor of it. That's not that it's really hard to say, well, my space, because I don't have enough space, I'm going to become violent. And how does that make any sense for any of the conquerors back in the day? Well, it's because we're finite on Earth. Yeah, I don't believe that. Every single living creature out, that's alive today or has lived, survives off of consumption of some sort, off of, and particularly other living things. You don't see people or not just people, but animals that survive off of, say, eating inanimate objects like rocks or mountains. You see that in Never-Ending Story, the rock biter. They don't exist. They don't. Why?
Wow.
Yeah.
Ruin those things.
That's but that's the thing. It's like everything lives by consuming some other living thing. that's just the nature of it.
Life.
It's life. That is literally life. You know, and I know we've talked about this before, about the romanticization romanticization
Don't make me say that.
of nature. You know, and it's literally a projection. When people they this way, I've heard so many people, even across social media, talk about like, oh my gosh, we need to go back to nature and being so at peace, and and look at even this predator who's prey. They're friends now. Look, they're so empathetic.
It's not
and I was like,
yet.
do you not understand anything about nature? It's like nature murders indiscriminately. Like sometimes, let's say a lot of times, but sometimes indiscriminately. They just murder for the sake of it. They rape, they pillage, they do all these different things. You know that we consider horrible things, but when people over romanticize nature, they kind of turn a blind eye to all these things. It's like, oh, look at they're so empathetic. It's like, no, when certain creatures, even humans, that we're as social beings, when we experience trauma around, similar trauma, it creates a bond. And it creates those bonds, and we feel connected. So whenever you see animals that are, say, running from a fire, or are both cold and they snuggle up to each other, predators and prey, and they create that bond, all of a sudden it's like, oh, look, they're friends. See, if they can do it, so can we. And it's like, yeah, well, those are marginal cases. In those marginal cases, using that as a basis for the rest of nature is ridiculous, because that was a traumatizing experience. And people do that not just for people, but for nature too. It's like, that's not how it works. That's not how it works at all. But yeah, I mean, those things, everything survives survives by consumption of some sort, right? When it comes down to it, again, you can't create or you can't destroy energy. It just manifests in different manners. It transforms or transmutates into different versions of energy, whether that be matter, whether that just be, along the EMF, I was gonna say EMF field, the EM fields of the EM spectrum, or not, whether it goes beyond. And here's the thing, it's like, and this is kind of like where I agree with certain people, where they're saying, a lot of people, and I'm not, this is not to dog on atheists, because I believe atheists have their right to believe whatever they want to, but a lot of atheists out there like to talk down on people who believe in God and religions and everything like that. And I can't say I never understood it. I can say that I've always felt that was more of a justification, a way to justify by putting others down, to justify their own beliefs. And in the realm of knowledge, right, you have things things you don't know that you actually know, things you don't know that you don't know, and then there's this giant realm of knowledge, which is things you don't know that you don't know. And I think I got that right. I hope I got that right. But essentially what that is like, there's this vast field of knowledge that we don't know. And it's extremely arrogant to try to say, like, hey, because this is stupid to say, like, there's some sort of man in the sky that says this, it's just stupid. It's vastly arrogant, because it may not be in reference of terms, especially talking about interdimensional or multidimensional sort of entities or beings and things like that, versus our three-dimensional, because we are three-dimensional beings, to say that we understand life, the universe and everything. It's actually kind of arrogant to say, like, no, there's no such thing as God or anything else that even comes to some sort of semblance of that. And it is vastly arrogant. How are we to know? You're saying for a fact that God doesn't exist. That's, to me, it's, again, that seems more like an egotistical sort of manner to go, like, oh, you believe in a man in the sky, some guy in some guy in the sky, and it's like.
I mean,
Then there are people that do take it to being the literal sense, and again, that's where your spiritual development kind of comes in.
do people like when I say that, like just because they can't see it, they don't believe it, versus
Yeah.
if you can't see it but you believe it. I mean,
So, okay, yes and no.
but you can believe it.
Seeing is believing, but how do you? All right. Okay, so one, seeing is believing for sure. And this is why a lot of religions are faith-based when they talk about faith, because it is literally things that you take on faith to believe that there are other things outside of you that are greater than you. You know, and this is my own personal view of that has been before, like, you know, my version of God isn't necessarily what a lot of people believe God to be. You know, to me, God is perfect mathematics, because our universe runs on perfect mathematics, and we can't even fathom how far and how deep those mathematics calculate. Even what seems like chaos, according to the biggest supercomputers or whatever, is not chaos. It is literally perfect mathematics. Okay, everything is set. It moves in its own direction, and it is all calculated in an infinite amount of ways, down to, like, again, to where we can't even calculate it. Put it this way, even the introduction of, say, antimatter into this world. All right, if fusion, what happens in the sun, you know, in fusion reactions, you've got antimatter that's created, which creates nuclear explosions over and over again, because the moment that antimatter comes in contact with matter, it literally destroys itself because it doesn't work. That's perfect mathematics. That's how that works. It doesn't just go like, oh, no, there's a bubble. There's always some sort of mathematical or scientific explanation for these things, even if we don't understand them yet. So, perfect mathematics, man. But again, to say like there's nothing that kind of that can influence those energies or bend them, whether it be space, time, or energy, because it's all energy to me. That's just wildly arrogant, considering too that we're literally talking about what's the most of what people are arguing about, Mr. Potato Head having a freaking gender, and extending those psychological genders to biological sex. Like, I know I've talked a lot about all this stuff too, but it's not how that works. They are not mutually exclusive, and there's plenty of studies out there that show that. Okay, the biological sex and psychological gender are not mutually exclusive, and I believe the practice started in the 80s, where they started to use gender as a term to mean sex, and it's not the same. And it's the dumbest thing.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Oh.
It was 82. I'm trying to remember where they started to officially use the term gender to mean biological sex, and I'm like, that's the dumbest thing, man. Keep them separate, because they are separate, and they're not mutually exclusive. Now what do we have? Gender politics. All right, we got gender politics. We got things. Unpopular opinion, I do not believe that the term transgender is actually something that is real. And again, this is not to say that people that feel either gender dysphoria, like they feel like they're in the wrong body, or that transsexuals are not real, because they are. The term gender, again, is psychological. It is psychological, whether it's stereotypes between male and female, stereotypes in societies or whatever, it's still vastly psychological.
But
sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, I'm interrupting you.
Go ahead.
But what if they believe that? Like, you know how people believe in God, and that's something they believe in.
That's fine.
Right?
Yeah, and okay, so here's the thing. This is why I'm saying, like, because they're different, and this is why language and semantics are really important, and understanding the connotative and denotative definitions is becomes vital to understanding. So the term transgender, right, implies that okay, step back. Let's go back to, let's say, like Carl Jung, and they're talking about masculine, feminine, and ambiguity, right? It's essentially it's all, I hate to say it's two sides of the coin, but it is almost like that. I like saying it's along the spectrum, right? On one side you have masculinity, on the other side you have femininity, and you have different stereotypical actions and mindsets that are associated with both. Now, there have been studies in the past that do associate masculine behavior to testosterone levels, and which is why men who are physically different than women have generally, not all, but generally have more testosterone build up through the majority of their life, and then that flip-flops in the later years. Women, on contrast, have more estrogen and that production through most of their lives, and then that flip-flops after menopause. Okay? That we literally have things that biologically happen to us that change us over time. Okay? On top of that, you have the psychological side of gender. Right? And this is where, like I said, if you go back to the original definitions of, say, gender being, whether they be stereotypes or groups of beliefs and things like that for men and women based off of masculinity and femininity, not male or female, but masculinity and femininity, and ambiguity, which is anywhere along that spectrum between the two. Every single person is transgender. Every single person experiences some level of masculinity, femininity, or ambiguity. In fact, that was supposed to be the journey for a lot of people, was whether you start out masculine, then you end up being a little more feminine, and then you cross it to be a true ambiguous. That's it. That's how that's supposed to work. That throughout your entire life. Okay? So every single person is literally transgender, whether it be by choice or not. That's the caveat too. You can choose to be, say you want to try to choose to be more masculine or more feminine to counterbalance certain things that you've got, right? Or to counterbalance certain aspects of who you are. Like I did that. I was more feminine growing up. I didn't consider myself transgender. I didn't consider myself transsexual. I think there was my first girlfriend broke up with me because she thought I was gay. I was like, why? Because I exhibited more feminine aspects, of being more interpersonal, being more caring for children. I helped raise some of my nieces and nephews. Okay. And then what? I actually literally chose to go to the Marine Corps to counterbalance that, to go like, you know what? I would like to experience more of that to become more well-rounded because of how I grew up. And I got that. Everything I went into, my goals for joining the military were very different than a lot of people's. On top of being able to serve my country, I wanted to build up, that masculine side of myself. And I did. So when I came out of it, and there was a transition period, and I knew there was a transition period to say, hey, I need to now round that out and find some sort of center where I can be a true ambiguous person. This is why I talk about, and especially in film and television, it was actually my thesis for my degree, was Ripley from Aliens. She is a true ambiguous character. In fact, she's so ambiguous, the role was originally written as a man. You cannot tell the difference. You cannot. Why? Because she is a true ambiguous. She displays masculine traits and feminine traits. Ergo, a full and a real ambiguous person. She's caring enough to, especially in Aliens, to go after Newt because of her instincts as just, you could say it's motherly instincts, but she's not afraid to throw down and get into the war, like handling weapons and want to learn about that stuff. Like all those things all tie together. And so Ripley she's still one of my favorite characters because of the fact that Ridley Scott decided to go, no, you know what, this seems very male-centric, let's just throw a woman in there. And it changed the dynamic of her character in the sense of it made her true ambiguous. Because if a guy does that, because all those things like, it's a war movie, they're guns, he's just going to do it anyway. It's different. It's much, much different than that. So, again, this is why, this kind of going back to it where I feel that gender is, every single person is transgender. Not every single person is transsexual. That's different. So transgender, again, every person, if you do go back to these older definitions of gender, where it is masculine and feminine, ambiguous, true, like psychological thing, whether you say they're attached to society or not, they are all intertwined in a way, but every single person experiences different levels of that throughout their entire lives. Ergo, is every single person is transgender. So, trying to push all these newer definitions on them, I don't agree with, because it muddled up a lot of semantics. It muddles up a lot of these things. You got gender politics going on the wazoo, almost literally, and that's all of what's going on. And to me, it's ridiculous, because communication is supposed to be all about clarification and understanding of each other. Now, you got all these people, let's say, if they feel a certain way, that's the problem. I love when Grant Cardone says this. It's like, feelings lie. Feelings and people lie. I just had some kid out there the other day messing with the cars out in, while they're driving, while they're walking by. I went out and confronted them because got him on video. This little kid. Hey, you messing with these cars? No. You sure you're not messing with the decals or the stickers on there? No. Oh, my video says otherwise. You want to see it? No. Yeah. That's, people lie. That's it. That's how it works. People and feelings lie. And basing, say, something like semantics or pronouns even, and I know I was kind of going back to the older argument. This is kind of different than the topic at hand. But going off of semantics, pronouns are based off of biological sex, things that are unchanging. Okay? Pushing beliefs that, no, I believe that it's not, muddles up the conversation. It muddles up understanding. It doesn't add for clarification. It doesn't add anything to it other than some sort of twisted view on it, which again, does not to say that people that are trans have some sort of twisted view, although maybe they do. I don't know. But the same could be said for anybody, which is why some sort of level of agreement on language and semantics is important. Right? Okay. I know that's a whole divergent subject that's in there. But kind of going back to those energies and whatnot, how do we get into this again?
You're asking the wrong person.
I'm trying to remember. Oh, this is... I'm very anecdotal. I know I go off into different topics on here, but just kind of going back to, we were talking about the belief in God and energy and everything like that. And my belief in God, again, is completely separate than what a lot of people believe, because I feel that it's more akin to, say, perfect mathematics as opposed to like a man in the sky. What is how a lot of, especially comedians, atheist comedians like to joke about. But again, our understanding of it, and there's this whole other side of it to say, like that we've studied in science. It says, you believe in multiple dimensions because there are multiple dimensions, because we are three-dimensional beings. Sorry, I'm just we're three-dimensional beings. That means there must be a one-dimensional being and a two-dimensional being in some sort of sense, right? But no, those are just theoretical. However, if it's theoretical and we can't prove it because we can't traverse down into the second dimension or traverse up into the fourth dimension in terms of physicality, right? That's where it all changes. Okay, so theoretically, if you have a two-dimensional being, they only know two directions, right? Up, down, left, right, and combinations of those. That is it. Trying to explain to them what we are in the third dimension, adding depth, okay, won't calculate as well. They won't understand. Even if they do understand it, they will not be able to traverse across it in their present state, in their present physical state. And that's, again, that is just their existence. Now we talk about, say, our existence in our present state. And I like saying that because I believe when... No, I'll get into that. I'll get it. In our present state, we cannot physically transform into fourth dimensional, fifth dimensional, etc., types of beings.
Can we reach it, though?
According to scientific laws, no. Now, okay, when you're talking about perspective, this is where it gets a little interesting. Who are you? Who are you? Where are you located in your body?
Huh. Wouldn't that always be the mind now?
Would it?
Your soul?
Would it?
Figured your soul.
Soul, right? What's a soul?
Isn't that another form of energy, though?
Possibly. Okay, so I had this is one of my old articles I wrote from way back when. There's something called the OEC, Online Energy Community. It's a callback from way back in the early 2000s. After the .com boom and everything, there's more people that started to come together as a community online, and we used to talk about these things. And I wrote an article called Training 3, and my basis for that article was, well, we have the physical, we have the spiritual or energy, we have energy, and then I thought there's a third level, and that could be the soul, which is who you are. Because where are you in your body of who you are, or where your consciousness, where does your consciousness reside, right? Soul was essentially what the most people account that for. I am me because my soul is mine, right? My soul, my entity exists. Some people say in the mind, in the brain, whatever. But how do you access the soul?
Soul's throughout, right?
If this is it. This is exactly why we have these conversations about that. So is it? Because my physical body, as it extends out as the physical representation of body, right? It moves as a single unit, but that can be attributed to, matter. Not just matter, but my biology, my anatomy, my physiology, all these things all together as a human body, right? But where do you reside? Where does your consciousness reside? So, in my article, I was writing, well, if there was a third level of base physicality to energetic level, which extends beyond to the rest of this universe, perhaps there's a third level, which is soul. Now, when you start talking about, say, religion, and when we talk about, say, when a lot of religions talk about God and how we are representations of God, and we are modeled after God. That's the one that I believe I pointed out then. If we're modeled after God, what does that mean? Well, think about perfect mathematics. We do not create, we do not destroy energy, we just transmute. So transmutation of energy, which lies along perfect mathematics, can be a way to access, say, the soul. Where our soul, our consciousness, or whatever, especially when it comes to life and death, especially when we transmute past that, we change that energy, that consciousness, into another form of energy.
But what about, they talk about it I remember hearing it about, Native Americans, people died, and because, when they kill animals, they use every part of it, right? So when a person dies, that their body decomposes into the earth, so basically putting it back into the earth.
Yeah.
Right? Wouldn't that be another form of transforming it?
The physical side, yes. But again, if you have physical, you have energy, and you have soul. And say if they exist on 3 different planes of each other, right? Our energy occupies us. We have a biofield, right? That is ours. That is generated from our physical bodies. It is separate. We have our own gravitational field. Albeit weak compared to, say, Earth. The more mass you have. Yeah, we have magnetism that. Yes, our energetic field. You just karate chop me.
It doesn't work. I thought it was magnet,
No,
okay.
that's not how that works. But you can actually sense certain things with just through basic feeling of energy around you. Just on your own field, and it's you. Okay. Where's I going with this? So physicality, when your physical body gives out, right, your energy just transforms. The energy that was used in here, people could say, it dies out. It doesn't die out. It transforms. It transforms and extends out. You ever see that movie Powder?
No, I don't know what that is.
Oh, okay. It was, I believe it was in the 90s that it was made. Spoilers, I guess. I don't know if you want to earmuff that, or.
It's fine.
Okay, so at the end of Powder, because he's supposed to have he was an albino, and I believe
just rude. Do you call people powder? Is that why?
It's just I didn't name it that. Anyway, but at the end of it, what had happened was he transmuted he transmuted so far over into energy that his physical body completely obliterated, and he became essentially like one with the universe. Right? He transformed into that. Now, again, when we talk about, say, God and how we're modeled after God, that's how I feel that interpretation was sort of meant to be. Because you got to think about a lot of the languages back then, right? Again, clarity. How do you explain the intricacies of, say, energy to people that may not have that in their language? That's huge. That's a big one, right? You're talking about like energy transference from, or transmutation even, from physical to, from your biofield, your physical, and I want to say like that your biofield is attached to the physical realm, energy through the physical realm from the energy that is you, which again is directed from your soul, because there are involuntary movements that your physical body gets restricted to, but most of the time, you, through your choice, through your consciousness, your soul, you choose how you're going to act. Now, there are arguments out there to say, like the inevitability of it is like you're going to act the way that you were always meant to act, and you're going to choose the way you're always going to choose. Is that true? That's another debate for it, right? You're talking about the inevitable choices you will make, and like as if it's essentially talking about destiny and fate.
Chaos theory.
Yeah.
Jurassic Park.
Yeah.
You would think it were all this way, everything's still the same, but it didn't. All the other way.
Yeah. It does tie into that too. It does. It absolutely does. But again, is that perfect mathematics, or is that choice? And then when you start talking about this, like what does life mean, et cetera, et cetera. What if we ride along these giant waves of just how we were supposed to play out regardless, and we just are repeating over and over again what's there? That's why humanity is cyclic. History repeats itself. Maybe. That's a big maybe though. Especially if I can say, well, my life has been built up to this point, and all of a sudden, now that I'm thinking about always going left, I'm going to choose to go right this time. But I would not have made that choice if all these things that happened in my life didn't happen exactly the way they were. If I didn't have this talk of having choice, or is it inevitable that I'm going to eventually come to this point to go, I am just going to choose to go right instead because I had this, and everything in the universe and everything in the past is built. Again, it gets into a lot of more
everything is cyclic though. Like you said, society is cyclic, right?
Yeah.
And you said the universe is cyclic. But thinking about like people as an individual, who develop cyclic behaviors from the parents, right? Generational.
Yeah.
Behaviors, but there's a way to break out of that.
There are, but is that not just part of the cyclic behavior of why it repeats? Again, you can go over and over with a lot of this stuff. However,
warning on our YouTube.
No, that's just the bit rate.
It's gonna fit the rate.
It's fine. Anyway, but that kind of goes back into. Like I said, like that cyclic behavior, and I actually had this conversation with my cousin yesterday, and I was explaining how we got into the discussion of astrology, and that I heard her talking to, I think it was my brother, and they were talking about signs, and I was like, so which one are you talking about? Are you talking about tropical or sidereal? And they were like, wait, there's a difference? I'm like, yes. So there is a difference between the Western or tropical astrology and sidereal or Vedic astrology. And they're based off of two different things. And I believe it's essentially, to break it down to the most basic level, Western or tropical astrology uses more planetary alignments, so like more based on our solar system, whereas...
Zodiac?
Yes, zodiacs. Whereas sidereal or Vedic astrology uses more universal, like stars, which are much further away. And there is an overlap between the two, where both do use planetary alignments to where they planetary alignments to kind of predict energetic happenings in the universe and how it affects us. So I was talking, and we got a little bit into that conversation of how there are differences in interpretations for that, and it came into going, well, the understanding of, say, not just universal or, in our own galaxy on the energies and how they affect us versus even just the moon and how it affects us. I went into an explanation about the gyros on Earth. Now, the Earth spins on an axis, roughly, right? And people, if people don't know, the Earth is not a complete globe. It's not completely round, but it's okay. But it does spin on a relative axis, and that axis does actually move. It's not just a perfect axis; it does actually move when it goes there. However, so because we spin on an axis, you stand on the North Pole or the South Pole, generally, you see the stars move in one particular direction. Think of it like a record player. Okay, you spin a record. What's the fastest moving point on there? It's not on the dot, on the center. It's furthest out. Okay, so the furthest out on that record spins the fastest. So if you drew a line from the center of the center of the record to the outside of the record, and you spin it, when it spins, this outside section spins a lot faster than the center. Okay, so now turn that into a three-dimensional Earth. Okay, you have Earth, spins on an axis, right? Now you have the equator, which is the furthest out, so it spins physically faster than the rest of the world. So, as such, you have a northern and southern hemisphere, right? I'm just going to take the northern hemisphere.
Does that mean you get older faster? If you're in...
No. Okay. In the northern hemisphere, okay? Say the Pacific Ocean and the Atlantic, same one. In the northern hemisphere, they have these things called gyros in the ocean. Okay, those gyros move according to the Earth, since the center is moving faster than the poles, right? The oceans will move in a counterclockwise position, for the most part. And again, this is this is in general. This is on like a macro level, and they create these things called gyros. This is why Southern California has such great weather and warm waters, and it's literally.
So
All this,
tropical?
yeah, they got all the tropical waters coming up towards it, and creating better weather.
I don't know. Our water's kind of cold.
It can be cold. You need to travel more. It's like it's cold, but you're also talking about Bay. I'm talking about like Southern California.
Oh.
Yeah, so that's why you got a lot better weather down in Southern California, because all those gyros in the oceans move in that sort of section. Again, that is a generalized macro version of gyros. Okay. Now, if you were to run only purely on those macro energies of that gyro, okay, that's one thing. However, there's more to it than that. Okay? In those gyros, right? Energy and flow of water, just talk about flow of water. Same thing like flow of energy. You can have a mass wave of energy moving in one direction. But on the outskirts of it, you have other gyros that are spinning off in different directions on their own. Think of it like creating a whirlpool, right? And then certain things come in, and then they fling out, and then they go off on their own path. It's kind of the same idea. And the whole idea of that was, in what the conversation kind of went to, was my belief in this whole idea of say, fate or destiny and energy just aligning and us repeating purely on alignment of universal energies. It's like, yes and no, because there will always be those that also swim against the current, okay, or cut through the current even. Those are all possibilities. Think about trout swimming upstream. They're literally swimming against the current. They're not going towards the direction that is meant to be the flow of energy, right? As people, as conscious beings, we can do the same. They may do it naturally because they need to know, like for trout, they're literally going to go breed, and those are their breeding grounds because of how they've adapted over centuries, right? But as people, we can choose to deviate from those natural energies. That to me is more powerful than anything in the world, and to me that kind of relates back to how when we say we are modeled after, say, God, right, or whatever your interpretation of God is, whether it be choice, whether it be perfect mathematics, whether it be energetical, whether it be consciousness, whether it be transmutation or whatever, all ties together. Because we can do a lot of those things. We can choose to cut against the grain. We can choose to deviate from that pattern and ride those smaller waves, right? And that's just my version of it, I guess you can say, from a macro to a micro level, and how it can affect us, or vice versa, right? Butterfly effect sort of deal. But we can choose those. Understanding all those things, great. But just because you understand it doesn't mean you have to follow it, or you must follow it. Okay, so this is where mindfulness becomes one of your most empowering attributes, your empowering traits, to where you get to choose. You get to choose what happens in your life, and that can eventually change. Again, butterfly effect, that can ripple across lifetimes. All right. This is how change actually happens, and where you can break cycles and cyclic sort of behavior. You have the power of choice. Yes, you have all these things working against you. Yes, you may have your biochemistry working against you, whether it be through addiction, or whether it be through addiction through drugs, or sugar, even, because sugar is one of the most addictive substances out there right now, right? You have all these things working against you, but you can choose. And that constant choice, it can cause a ripple effect. Or if the constant push to get out of it, you may fall right back into it. That's a possibility too. But do you give up and just let it take you into chaos, into whatever you feel is like, oh, this is just going to happen? Or are you going to continue to get stronger and choose to move out of that? Right? And again, to me, that's where your soul has the most power. That's where it is, the interpretation, or your definitions of God, of spirit. I don't even say spirit, because I still feel spirit is more energetic, and it's more personal. It's something you can actually detect, whether it be through biofields or not. But soul, where your consciousness is, where they cannot find that, right? It accesses it through that. Through maybe intention. Maybe intention is that fourth dimension, the access through the fourth dimensions and higher. Intention and mindfulness, willingness, is what actually drives us and our energy and our physicality to do stuff. I don't know. All good questions, all things that we thought. Well, I've thought about, and I've tried studying for many years. I haven't studied in a while, but that's because of the New Age movement, where they try to shift that. It was probably about 15 years ago.
It's because they got rid of Pluto.
Yeah, telling you. No, but there was this huge shift from a lot of the energies and understanding a lot of these esoteric beliefs of whether it be God, whether it be religion, whether it be energy, whether it be soul, meditation, and things like that. And it started getting twisted. Again, kind of like how language has been twisted with a lot of it, with semantics have been twisted. And they made this whole, how did I put it? I'd hate to say it's more like the woke society, that we have going on, where it's like they try to own it, but they try to own it in a way where it twisted its meaning, as opposed to taking it, understanding it, and then modifying it and owning it as their own. So twisting a meaning to mean something that it means something to you, and then try to force that onto other people, again, that's different than actually understanding it. And that's where it kind of lost. Well, it lost me and a lot of practitioners for that. And some people just rode that wave. They rode that wave. Oh, we're already coming up on an hour. This is an hour. Anything else to add? I know I've been talking this whole time, as usual. Not saying this bad. I'm sorry. It's just I am a talker. That is what happens.
No, I mean, I pretty much said what I wanted to say throughout the...
Okay. No, I appreciate you just being here. Presence, the immediacy factor. This is what's called the immediacy factor in speech. When we talk about persuasion. Talk about persuasion. It's easier to talk to somebody and influence them on a personal level, because you've got energies going back and forth. You've got body language that has happening in real time. There's so many of these unconscious actions that go on in our mind, in our body, in our soul, in our energy, that we don't see and do not typically consciously think about. while we're having them, and they happen like that, and we run off of that, and either we run with it or we cut against it, whether by choice or by not, right? So, just things to think about. Hey, so we're gonna end this because that's our hour that's up there. Hopefully, you guys like this. Again, I'd like to talk more about this stuff just because it's something that's huge in my life, and it has been, for a very long time. This is parts of the reason why I'm a huge advocate for meditation and understanding and how it relates not just to your physical body, whether it be addiction, whether it just be controlling your own self, whether it be through helping yourself psychologically, mentally, spiritually. These are all important things, and at least to me they are, and if they're important to me, I'd like to add that back to everybody else. So I know this is a little bit of deviation from what we usually do because we're filmed.
Well, we have plenty of videos. So.
But we do have plenty of videos out there. So thanks for everybody for thanks for everybody for joining us for our live lunches. We'll be back again on Thursday at noon. We'll see what we're going to talk about then, but we'll figure it out. Thanks so much. You guys have a great one.
Bye.